Hello and welcome to Newsbreakers here on FiOS 1 News. I'm Andrew Whitman. We begin once again with the current debate over gun laws in America. It was the national topic last weekend as more than 800,000 people participated in the March for Our Lives in Washington, a call for gun laws and gun and school safety reforms led by these students from Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. There were sister marches across the nation and around the world, including several here in our region, thousands gathering in White Plains, New City, Yonkers, and elsewhere. Those calls for changes to gun laws may find an audience in Albany. The democratically controlled state assembly has passed some new gun safety measures, but the Republican-led Senate has been reluctant to follow suit. The converse is true on school safety measures, which have passed the state Senate, but have not advanced thus far in the assembly. The state budget, which is often the final deadline for major legislative pushes, is midnight Saturday, so any final decisions by lawmakers will come after this program tapes for the week. But there's another proposal generating headlines that its author hopes will be included in any final deals, a so-called red flag law that would allow authorities to confiscate weapons held by people considered to be risks to themselves or others. That push being led by Westchester County District Attorney, Democrat Anthony Scarpino. And Mr. Scarpino joins us now for more on his proposal. Mr. District Attorney, welcome to Newsbreakers. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
So, first of all, what is a red flag law? What would it do?
Well, it would empower the law enforcement to step in when there's a situation is reported to them of an individual that appears to be in crisis and who has access to weapons, and gives us the ability to petition the court to remove the guns from that individual temporarily, and then have a hearing, a due process hearing, to determine whether the weapon should be returned to the individual or whether they should be withheld for a longer period of time.
How would it work? Would it be if let's say a domestic partner of a person is concerned about their safety, they could report them to police and that's the process it would go through, or police could make a similar report?
Well, I anticipate, we're sort of trying to evaluate how it would actually occur in reality, but we know that the family members are going to be the ones to generally see the red flags of an individual in crisis. We anticipate they would report it to the police. The district attorney's office would be able to, upon that information, petition the court. The court could, on its own, if sufficient cause is shown, immediately for a 6-day period, remove the weapons, pending the opportunity to have a hearing and due process. So, that it would start from generally family members, domestic partners, who recognize this to be the case. And we're learning from some of the incidents, the most recent incident, like in Lakeland, we see that there have been all sorts of red flags that were being raised. And you hear on a regular basis people saying, the FBI knew about this, law enforcement knew about it, they should have done something. But the problem was, and is, under New York state law right now, we have no authority to do anything until an incident occurs. And this is why it's so important, so that we can do our job, to have legislation of this nature.
What about work associates of somebody? I mean, because it seems a while ago that was the focus of a lot of these mass shootings, but many of them have been workplace related. If a boss or a coworker was concerned about somebody, could they also similarly make a complaint?
Sure, they could make a complaint, and law enforcement would evaluate it and then decide to move from there. Red flags will come from the community. We anticipate that. But I would say probably, most of them, the family will spot it the most and be able to give the most detail.
In your mind, if this proposal were to become law, first of all, would a judge make the final determination as to whether to remove the guns or ability to buy guns from somebody? And what's the threshold for making that determination? Would it be similar to that of a protection order, or would it be a higher threshold?
Well, yes, it would be a judge that would make that decision. The law enforcement agencies would bring the case. District Attorney's Office, I anticipate, would be the ones that would be doing it. But the fact of the matter is there would be a standard by which the legislation doesn't talk too much in detail about that standard, of whether the individual appears to be a threat to themselves or others. And that is the standard we usually use in mental health types of matters when people are seeking to have individuals civilly committed. And this would be the standard that the judge would have to use.
And the person who is the source of the concern, they would have an ability to argue their case in that same hearing?
Yes. Yes, they would have counsel, and they would argue against it. Now, we have there's an opportunity for a temporary order, which would be done ex parte, which means without the individual there. If there was an emergency situation where the court was satisfied that law enforcement or family have demonstrated sufficiently that we should temporarily move these weapons up to a period of 6 days, but by the time within that 6 days, they're entitled to a due process hearing where that individual would be present, would have an opportunity to refute the evidence that is presented.
Is this something that would then go on a criminal or otherwise record for this individual? And I'm thinking of, let's say, a domestic situation that's unraveling and a couple that's bickering and perhaps leading towards a divorce. You know, if one of the partners makes that claim against another one, is that something that could then be used against them either in divorce proceedings or in a subsequent criminal issue?
Well, it's a civil type of action that we're dealing with. When we get into areas of matrimonial, could things be used of this nature in a matrimonial? Having done matrimonial cases, people use the nuclear option on a regular basis. So I think it would probably be able to be raised under those circumstances. But it is civil in nature. It's not like a criminal nature. But what you do have, though, is with that order being out, it also prevents them from applying for a weapon, trying to purchase one. So it's going to be put on a register there.
How does somebody then who, let's say, has been red flagged, how does somebody go back in either 6 days or some other period of time and say, yeah, I know you found that I was problematic or had issues before, but now I'm okay? I mean, it seems like that would be a difficult bar for somebody to clear to try to get back, you know, the ability to purchase or to hold their weapons.
No, I think they would have to, present evidence. They've been seeing a therapist, whatever the issues may be, try to address it. It's, the nature of the burden is going to be clearly on the law enforcement to initially make the case that these weapons should be removed from the individual. But if at a point in time they are desirous of changing that, they feel their mental state has changed, it would be important for them to have professional documentation to that effect.
What if the person, and I apologize for just coming up with hypotheticals here, but it's an interesting topic. What if the person who was red flagged was a police officer or a member of the military? Wouldn't that prevent them from being able to do their job? And so wouldn't that have a greater impact than just simply having access to firearms?
Well, it would. It would have impact on their ability to do their job if they appear, when we're saying they appear in front of a court and the court makes a determination that they are a threat to themselves and others, it is clearly going to cause a problem with them having access to weapons.
I believe red flag laws are on the books in 6 other states. I believe Connecticut is one of them. Yes. And that goes back to a shooting that was pre-Sandy Hook. That was a workplace shooting incident. Any indication from those outside states how effective this is? And is there any way to know how many, I guess, people are involved or how many lives might have been saved?
Well, I think, Connecticut has attempted to suggest numbers of hundreds of lives have been saved according to them. Their legislation is about 10 years old in Connecticut. And much of this comes from information dealing with suicides. This is not just incidents involving mass shootings that we're concerned about. This, nature of this response is also to protect individuals from harming themselves. Suicides more people die of suicides than die from other types of activity like we're talking about, mass shootings. And so the effort in this end is also to protect these individuals from themselves. When they decide, and also in domestic abuse types of areas, this is when weapons are available in the scenario of a domestic abuse. These are crimes of opportunity that occur, and weapons are being used, and there are deadly results.
Why wouldn't a red flag gun law be essentially redundant? If it was somebody who was unstable and considered a threat to themselves or others, isn't that grounds for involuntary commitment, which would ameliorate the concern or the threat of them attacking somebody, since they would be committed, or at the very least lead to a protection order, which would, I assume, lead to some level of protection one individual to another?
I wouldn't consider it redundant. First of all, this provides law enforcement the opportunity to immediately step in, make an application based upon events that seem to be occurring, that they're in crisis by view of what they're doing on Facebook, by what they're saying to people, how they're threatening people. Under the mental hygiene law, when you're involved in those types of civil commitments, you need to have the person brought in. They have to be voluntarily be put in there. They have to have doctors evaluate them. You need several psychiatrists. This is an opportunity to expedite it, to separate the weapons. The goal is to separate the weapons, not to involuntarily commit them. All we're trying to do is separate the weapons from the individual in crisis.
And if somebody was later found, I'm not even sure of the terminology, competent doesn't seem like the right term, but
The weapons would be returned.
to be no longer a threat, they would just be returned. They could.
Yes, if the determination is made that there's insufficient evidence to that effect. But right now, the law enforcement has no ability to engage and separate individuals that appear to be in crisis. So it seems so unfair. Everyone's expecting law enforcement, gee, you've been made aware of this. This person has been acting in erratic behavior. He's posting, and you should have done something. Everyone's questioning why we didn't do something in Parkland. And the fact of the matter is there was really no authority to do it. This will give you a civil protective order so that you can engage and take those weapons away.
You know as well as I do that there's an enormous pushback from gun rights supporters, particularly when it comes to things like a gun registry in this country. They do not want one comprehensive list of who has guns and who doesn't. If somebody were to have a red flag ruling against them at some point in their past, is that something that would come up on a police computer printout, or if police are responding to a subsequent issue at the home of somebody who had been red flagged at some point in the past? Would that information come up on the screen? Would they know that this is the home of a gun owner?
That's a good question. I couldn't tell you how that would play out. I mean, we don't even have the legislation. Nothing has seemed to occur. You're asking me to speculate. But the fact of the matter is, if weapons have been taken away from them at some point in time, but they've been returned, I don't see how that would have impact. It's possible that law enforcement might be aware that they have weapons.
What prompted your pitch on this? Is this something that you just have seen in other states, and given the headlines that we've seen recently, you thought might help? Or have you had examples coming through your office, either in the district attorney's office or when you were in private practice, where you thought this would be important?
Well, I think the timing, of course, is associated with what we've been seeing and incidents we've been seeing. But since I've been district attorney, I've had several situations where it appears that there are individuals with access to weapons that appear to be within experiencing crisis. Appear to be some red flags, maybe verbal threats that are made, but we have certain constitutional rights to say what's on our mind to some degree, and we're aware that maybe they have weapons, but we had no ability to seek a protective order to take those weapons and have an evaluation in this regard. So, and it keeps me up at night because that information has made aware to the law enforcement, the district attorney's office has become aware of it, and if that individual then goes out and does what they threaten to do, people will be saying, why didn't you do something? I don't have that authority to do it. And we're seeing it right now. What goes on in Parkland, they're blaming everybody for it, but there was no authority. Now I understand that Florida just recently, in the last few days, actually passed legislation like we're talking about. We call it ERPO. So.
And again, we don't know what the status of this is going to be through Albany. Budget negotiations are continuing, and we're taping this on Thursday. The deadline for the budget is Saturday. Usually they try to jam as much legislation in before the wire as they can, though they could certainly bring this up down the road. Since you've proposed this, since you pitched this, what's been the feedback that you've gotten from other district attorneys, the state attorney general, and other lawmakers?
Well, I've spoken to several lawmakers on a regular basis about other criminal justice initiatives, and most of the lawmakers I've spoken to were supportive of this ERPO legislation. There are the New York City District Attorney's offices, all of them, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Bronx. They've already come out in support of this type of red flag type of legislation. So it's very positive in that regard. So I think overall it has been positive from what I'm hearing. But I'm sure there are those who are always very concerned about any legislation dealing with weapons. That it concerns them. But the fact of the matter is, as far as I'm concerned, even on the national level, when we hear rhetoric, all you will hear from organizations like the NRA and other organizations is it's not the weapon, it's the individual. We have to separate people that are not in the right, proper state of mind from their weapons. This is a gun safety issue, okay? This is what it is, gun safety. To me, it's pretty much a no-brainer. It should have a wide range support. But the kabuki dances that go on up in Albany, I don't anticipate it to be attached to the budget, this pressure to pass the budget, but it will be revisited because this is not going to be going away.
And finally, I mentioned the political divides between the state assembly and the state senate, and one's democratically held, one's Republican held. That's one of the reasons why there hasn't been a lot of motion on gun laws since Parkland in New York. You're the district attorney in Westchester. Overwhelming majorities in the county legislature and in the county executive's office. Is this something that or is there anything similarly that can be done solely on the county level here as we wait for action or lack thereof in Albany? Or is this something that can only be on the state level?
I really think it has to be on the state level. I don't see how you could have this type of legislation on the county level. No, I don't see it. And yes, Westchester seems to be very supportive of it. But, the state of New York is a very different state when you go. I went to school in Syracuse, upstate. It's very, very different. Parts of it is more like Montana, where you were. Yeah. And, the attitude about weapons is very different than in a highly populated, densely populated area.
Anything else do you think we need to know about your proposal, or anything else that you want to tell people at home or that I've forgotten to ask?
Well, I just think it's very important for folks to recognize that this is a gun safety issue. This is not about taking weapons away from individuals. It's not a Second Amendment issue. This is about separating people in crisis from their weapons temporarily with due process to prevent greater problems that we have, whether it be the suicides that occur. It's not just for the citizen that's out there that we're worried about, like the students in Parkland. It's also like Mr. Cruz himself. If we had interceded, he might be alive today, and all these other people might be alive today. So it's really, suicide is a major problem. Domestic violence is a major problem.
Always better to prevent these things and get help where it's needed, if at all possible. Westchester District Attorney, Democrat AnthonyScarpino, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Hopefully the first of what's hopefully many conversations on this program.
Look forward to speaking to you some more.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.